Well, good morning, my friends. Whether you are tuning in from St. Louis, Missouri, where it is a little rainy, a little chilly, and not feeling very spring-like at all, or somewhere else around the country or around the world, I want to welcome you to Live Inspired Together with John O'Leary. A little bit of background first and foremost on what Live Inspired Together is. It's a community of leaders who are changing the world, starting with their own. So we're going to be unpacking what that looks like today as we focus on a topic that I think is relevant to every single one of us. Yes, even on this rainy Saturday morning, it's canceling the cancel culture. So as we begin this conversation today, what I'm going to encourage everybody to do is to, one, let me know where you are tuning in from. Where are you paying attention from today? Where are you listening to this voice or watching this stream? We have a podcast that streams into 75 nations. No, not 75 states. There are not yet 75 states, 75 nations. So we got a nice global reach. And I'm curious where you're tuning in from today. I want to hear where you're in from. And I want you to know on the front side that on the back side, we're going to pick out 12 lucky winners who share or comment or maybe even like the content from today, because we want you to receive some goodies on the back end. Part of those goodies are going to be attached to my first story today. Her name is Amy Wolf. So we'll get into Amy here in just a moment. But first, let me say good morning to those who are tuning in. We got Michael from Hutchinson's, Kansas. Good morning from Baldwin, Bob, Nashville, Tennessee, Mike Murphy. Hello, Michael. Glendale, Missouri. Hey, babe, Tina, I'm in Kirkwood right now. So if you can cross Lindbergh Road, we'll meet up for a cup of coffee. Fired up from Macomb. Thank you, John Daly. New Hampshire, St. Louis, Tan Valley, coming in from all over the United States and all over the world. I want to welcome all of you. And I thank you for tuning in this morning for a topic that we think is incredibly important, the cancel culture. When I told some of my friends in this space that we're thinking about talking directly about the cancel culture, the advice they all gave us is, don't do it. It's too much of a hot button issue. You yourself will be at risk of being canceled by the right or the left. Be careful. You'll offend both sides. Just don't mess with it, John. So how do we talk about things that are uncomfortable? How do we address things that other people would rather just ignore and walk away from and build a higher wall as they move in the opposite direction from? How do you do that? Well, that's why podcast 350 mattered so much to me. And I think it matters so much to you as well. The name of my most recent friend on the Live Inspired podcast, her name is Amy Wolf. 2 F's in Amy Wolf. She's episode number 350. She lives in a small town in Oregon, and she was dismayed and crushed to learn that a child had taken his own life. And then as crushed as she was to learn this, she learned then that it was the 6th suicide in her small town in the past 18 months. And she said, what are we doing about this? What are we doing about this? And those gathered around the room, like, what can you do? What can you do? So Amy said, I don't know, but I want to do something. And so she came up that night with an idea to make a sign just to remind individuals, whether they are young and they're struggling, they're feeling isolated in high school, or they're older and they're struggling and they're feeling isolated and alone later on in life, that they're not alone, that their life has value. Don't give up. And so she took $150 or so out of the bank. She printed a couple dozen signs and started placing them around the neighborhood. I want to show you a picture of what this neighborhood began to look like. She was sure that there would be people who wanted those signs out of their yard. They would want them out of the yard. They don't want them in their yards. But she did this. And then to her shock, people would reach out and say, Amy, I can't tell you how meaningful that was to see that sign in my neighbor's front yard. Can I get one for my yard? And then someone else would reach out and say, that really made a difference. I was having a really bad day. And then you reminded me that I'm not alone, that I am enough, that my life actually has dignity and worth, that I matter. Amy, it means a lot. Can I get a couple of those signs? What began as a little side project has turned into a global movement. Amy has now shipped those signs to all 50 states, to dozens of countries, in the quantity of more than 1 million signs now, reminding people that they are enough, that they matter, that they have dignity. So live inspired together community on this Saturday morning, 9:05. I know it's early. I'm going to take a big swig of coffee right now. If you had to go to FedEx, Kinko's, or to your local print shop and get a sign made, if you had to create a bumper sticker or a tattoo telling the world what matters to you, maybe what ought to matter to them, what would be on your sign? So I'm going to give you just a moment to type that into me right now. But if you had to create your own sign, or if you had to put one of Amy Wolf's signs in your front yard, what would you want on your sign? What would be the message that you would like to share today on April 24th with a world that is divided, that is struggling, that is at war, that is in sadness? What would you tell the world? What would be your message? Post it in. Remember, we're picking 12 winners today. So the more you post, the more likely you are to win. Choose love. That's awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Respect, Sarah. How about a little respect? Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Kim, my friend, I love you. Brother O'Leary, discover your purpose. Amen. Discover your purpose. Hope lives here. Ask me. Rana, if they knocked on that door, their life would change. Love God, love one another. Let's go hop to two more. You matter, Tammy. You matter. Be grateful. Be grateful. Can you imagine if we actually not only read that sign, but lived that sign? Just be grateful in all things. There are a couple signs around my home growing up. One of them, my mother hung this in our kitchen, was this: this too shall pass. This too shall pass. It was a reminder to her O'Leary children when we felt on top of the world. We made the team. We got the A. We got invited to prom, whatever it was. Hey, don't get too big of a head, because these great days that you're experiencing, do not take them for granted, because this too shall pass. But it was also a reminder of this: when we did not make the team or get the grade or get in the school or get invited to prom, John, children, this too shall pass. It's okay. It's about something bigger at play right now than what you think it is. This too shall pass. You matter. Love lives here. These are all signs around my house. The best is yet to come hangs in my kitchen. I want my kids to remember the best is yet to come. But there's another sign that I learned from a child in New York that I want to share with you today as we talk about canceling the cancel culture. Many of you have met me through speaking, whether I spoke to your business or your association, your volunteer group. Maybe it was a live session or a virtual session, or some of you more recently, a coaching session. All these things have been phenomenal ways for us to connect with one another. Frequently, in the good old days of 2020, 2019, 2018, and before, I used to get on airplanes, and travel. I would speak to the organization and then afterwards speak to kids. My heart is with our children. My passion is for loving our little ones. And so after speaking to the folks in the blazers and in the buttoned up blouses, I'd go into the school, speak to these kids. And there was an encounter that I had at a public school outside of New York that in some regards changed my life. And it's part of the reason why we're having this topic today. After speaking, these kids were all coming up afterwards, fist bumping Brother O'Leary as they walked back to class. And this one little kid doesn't fist bump me. For whatever reason, this little man walks over, he puts his big old arms around me. He pulls me in tight like this. And it's a long, almost awkward hug, man. It goes on maybe a little too long. He's like a third grader. And then finally, this sweet little boy lets go, stands back 1 foot or so. I want to show you his face so you can see this precious little guy that I was able to look at that day. And then he shared with me a simple sentence that I think ought to be on our yard signs. What that little man said to me that day were these words. He said, "Mr. John, we are the same. We are the same." And I looked at this little man. He is a child of color. I am a person who grew up white, still am. He is a little guy. The school that we were speaking to that day was 100% free and reduced lunch. I grew up looking back on it in a household of privilege. The principal told me before we met that day that this child, and not only this child, but most of the children in that school are being raised either by grandparents or great grandparents. I grew up with my mother and father in the household and around a dinner table every single night with a golden retriever and 5 siblings in a very, very, very safe neighborhood. And so I look at this little guy, which seems like we have so little in common, actually. And I say to him, "We are we?" And he says to me again, "Mr. John, we are the same." And this time, as he says it, he's got tears in his eyes. And then with that, he holds up his right hand, this precious little right hand of his. And I'm going to show you the picture of what his precious right hand looks like. You can see that it looks a lot like John's right hand as well. Fingers are missing on every single one of his fingers and his thumb. He pulls me closer one more time, and then he says the sentence one final time, "Mr. John, we are the same. We are the same." And with that, with his, in quotes, healthy, in quotes, normal left hand, he wipes his cheeks, wipes those tears, and then he skips down the hallway. And I'm left there wearing a suit, looking at this little man, realizing how right he is, but how rare it is in the marketplace to hear that kind of sentence. Did you hear that this morning on CNN or on Fox or on MSNBC? Or as you grabbed your morning paper, or as you tuned into social media, reminding us, no, actually, we're one. We are the same, brothers and sisters. If COVID has reminded us of nothing else, it probably should have reminded us of that what affects one over there affects us over here. We are the same, but we don't hear that story frequently. We don't hear that story. For the last 16 years, I've been a motivational speaker traveling around the United States and around the world. Most of the questions on our pre-program survey are to get a better sense for the clients that we are called to serve. I want to know what their problems are. I want to know what their vision is. I want to know what their mission is. I want to know what's going on with their team members, what their version of success is going forward, why they're bringing me into the meeting. But there's also question number 13. Question number 13 is, what topics do you not want me to talk about? And there are always two. For 16 years, there have been two topics that they've always said, "John, do not bring these up." My friends tuning into my voice today on the Live Inspire Together channel, what are the two topics that you think you just can't talk about with your corporate clients? What are the two topics? Type it in right now. Get your chance to win a goodie bag at the end of this session. What are the two topics that we just can't talk about publicly anymore? That's right. Politics and religion. Politics and religion. For 16 years, that has been on every one of my answers to question number 13. John, do not even think about talking about politics. It's an ugly thing. Don't talk about it. You'll lose half the room. Or religion. You'll lose the other half of the room then. Just don't talk about it. Politics and religion. That list lately has been expanding, though. Politics and religion, that's how it began. But now I want to show you what it is now. It's growing a little bit. Maybe some of you can relate with this. That's right. Race, gender, sexual differences, gun rights. Don't talk about voting right. Do not talk about the Supreme Court. Don't talk about DC possibly becoming a state or minimum wage or livable wage or healthcare, judicial system. Don't talk about international policy, national debt, taxation, O'Leary. Don't talk about any of this stuff, man. It will just cause you to lose the room. And so we don't. And instead, from the safety of our basements, we tweet about it and we build higher walls and we cancel one another out when they disagree with us. And I have a couple of stats, actually, not just two, 3 stats that ought to have us sit up a little bit and strive to not just talk about topics that are awkward and uncomfortable, but to listen. Imagine that. Imagine, for those of us who only watch MSNBC, if tonight we tuned into Fox, just listen. Just listen. Imagine if, for those of us tuning in only to Fox, if tonight we tune into CNN or MSNBC, and just listen. For those of us who go to coffee shops and we only sit with guys who look and act and vote and worship just like us, if we extended the table a little bit more to invite in people who look and act and worship a little differently than we did, and instead of telling them how wrong they are, we listened. We just listened. What's happening today because of our inability to listen and our demand to cancel? What is happening? Well, let me share with you 3 stats. They're going to pop up on the screen in front of you right now. What do these represent? The 13% after the last election represents how many of us stopped speaking to a family member. 13% of us stopped speaking to a family member because they were wrong in the way they voted. That's a big number, but it's not as big as the second, which is 80%. 80% of us today in 2021 have very few or no friends who vote differently than we do. 80% of us leaders, ladies, Live Inspired Together community have very few or absolutely no friends who vote differently than we do. And 91% of us today are absolutely convicted and confident that the country will be lost forever if, in quotes, the other side wins. That's how divided we are right now. 13% of us no longer speak to a sibling or a parent or a child. 80% of us refuse to make friends with people who vote differently than we do. And 91%, that's a healthy majority, are utterly convicted that if the other side, that those people, if those people win, that the country will be lost forever. What do we do about this? How do we begin to rectify this gap and this divide and this wall that is being built? How do we do this? Today, leaders, I want to give you 3 ways and then ask for your permission to give me a 4th. Okay? So I have 3 of the blanks filled in, but I'm going to need you to participate on the 4th on how we can begin coming back together, how we can begin canceling the cancel culture. So let me walk you through what I think are a few ways that we can begin bridging this gap together. Okay, let's go. A few ways. Number 1, cancel. Let's get this slide up on the screen. We're going to cancel social media. Social media serves us video and posts and comments and thought leaders who believe, who worship, who act, who feel exactly as we do. They are smart enough leaders to know how we feel, what we search for, what we like, what we put thumbs down to, what we swipe right to, and what we swipe left to. And so then what our dear friends out west, Silicon Valley, are doing to us now, they are giving us more of the same. And now we are living in an echo chamber of our own making. How do you break free of that echo chamber? Take pause. Take a digital detox. It's healthy sometimes from sweets, from carbs, from alcohol. And I'm telling you right now, utilizing social media, I get that this is weird, but I'm telling you, Facebook will probably just shut me down right now as I say this. Take a break from social media. You will find yourself far more at ease if you go through life using your own lens instead of theirs. So take a pause from time to time. Maybe it's periodically throughout the day, maybe it's throughout the week, or maybe it's just taking pause for a full month, man. Just pause. From Twitter to Tinderbox, step away from it. But it's not the only one out there. There's been an expression with media for generations. It goes like this. If it bleeds, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads. That's always been known. It's always been proven. It's always been acted upon. But now 94.5% of news stories on both sides of the aisle, please don't think I'm knocking on the right or the left, baby. I'm coming for both parties. 94.5% of news stories are negative. And because they have polls going out there in real time, they understand exactly what is getting your blood pressure to rise, what is causing you great apprehension and fear. And because they know, guess what they do? At the end of their 2-minute segments, when they try to sell you their products, they tell you more about it. And they tell you more about how divided it is, how bad it is, what happened over there. And if you can sit through 2 more commercials, we'll talk more about it in 2 more minutes. And all day long, they tell you how bad and broken and divided and filled with hate the world is. And then you open up your front door and you see a child riding by on their bike. And you have a neighbor who maybe you've never even met before, but they walk by with a dog and they wave at you and you wave back at them. And you wonder, gosh, sometimes when I go through life with my own lens, it feels a little bit different than this. So if you want it to feel a little bit different going forward, one of the ways that you can do that is cancel social media for a period of time. Another way, though, is to pull the cable. Stop paying attention. Pull the cable. Cancel the cable. Watch what happens. Watch how much more vibrant not only you feel about life, but you are able to connect with human beings who might vote and feel and think and look differently than you, which leads us to the third piece. Cancel seeing another human as another. So I want you to cancel seeing another human being as another. When you find yourself or when you hear someone else using the expression, beginning a sentence, a statement, those people, you know those people who voted that way, who did that thing over the week, those people. That is when you are no longer identifying them as a brother or as a sister who may vote or act or look or worship different than you, but you are seeing them as less than you. Those people. So my friends, today I strongly encourage, implore, and plead with you to stop seeing another human being as in other. There's no way to see the dignity of a human being if we're dividing up upon those lines. So no more. Cancel that one out. And the fourth one, I'm going to put it on the screen. It's got a question mark next to it. It's early enough in the morning that I still need a little coffee. So I'm going to have you type in, text in, chat in your response on this one. Give us another way that we can come back together, that we can unify around what makes us the highest and best versions of our collective selves. How do we cancel the cancel culture? How do we come back together as one? I put forward 3 ideas. What are some that you may have? Give yourself, Janet, permission to forgive yourself and others. Grace. Imagine that. Give yourself a little grace. Not a whole lot of that in Twitter today. Do unto others the way you would have done unto you, Dave. Imagine if we treated others as if they were our brothers and sisters, because they are. The divine in me sees the divine in you. The divine in me recognizes the divine in you. Thank you, Mikkel. Seek first to understand. Thank you, Paul. Can you imagine that one these days? Cancel self-righteousness, Robin. Gosh, there are a lot of people who are awfully self-righteous today. Cancel your own ego and be willing to see others as you. Extend grace, Cam Seal. Love one another, Corey. Love one another. John Daly. Keep encouraging others to be their best. Encourage and kindness to others and do it every single day. This all sounds so like they all sound like platitudes, except they're transformational. Cancel judgment, Louise. Go outside your comfort zone, Laurie. There's a picture to my right up here of Martin Luther King Jr. One of my favorite expressions from him, he wrote about it quite a bit, is actually love. And one of my favorite lines on love from MLK Jr. is this: "It is hard for me to like the man who is kicking me in the head when I'm on the ground." And then I realize I don't have to like him. I just have to love him. It's hard for me to like the man who is kicking me in the head. And we've all felt that way from time to time. Some of us far more than others. It's hard for me to like the man who's kicking me in the head when I feel like I'm on the ground. And then I realize I don't have to like him. I just have to love him. The person who taught me an awful lot about love entered into my life when I was a college senior. Just senior in college. I was self-focused. I was probably tired from being out a little bit late the night before. The whole world was about me and what I could get out of it. Welcome to my world and most of our worlds when we're 21 or 22 years old. And then I met a man who was the handyman for my apartment building. His name was Harold. And every couple of weeks or so, this guy would come into my room, come into our world, come into our building and clean and sweep and redeem and make things new again. And we just started this kind of friendship where when he'd show up, I'd just hang out with Harold. We'd walk around a little bit. Not long after graduating in college, I started a real estate development business. And I had to figure out, how do I build this thing with hands that struggle holding a pen, let alone a hammer? I knew I needed help, and I knew I could not do it by myself. And so I hired a man who was, to me, in quotes, a handyman. But Harold was much more than that. He was incredibly gifted as a carpenter. He was gifted with plumbing, with electric. He could sheet a roof. He could guide other men forward. He could help us tear down a building and then bring it back to life. And as we worked together day after day after day, although we felt differently about some topics, although we voted differently on some topics, although we worshiped in different places, although we grew up in completely different places, although we had completely different skin tone, we grew to love each other as brothers. Harold is my brother, and I'm his brother. We love each other, and he became part of our family. When Beth and I were married, Harold was at our wedding and part of our wedding. When Beth and I had our own children, one of the first to come over and celebrate the birth of our firstborn was a guy named Harold. Next picture, please. He held up our little Jack. So that is a picture of Harold coming over that day to help me shovel the snow, play with he calls him his nephew, Jack. Then something cool happened. Not only was Harold coming over to visit my kids, I became familiar and friendly with his kids. In other words, we weren't building walls. We were building bridges. We weren't talking about other people. We were doing life as one people. We would have a Christmas party every year. Clients were invited, friends were invited, family was invited. And because family was invited, well, Harold was invited. And then if family's invited, then he would also bring his family. Next picture, please. So at the Christmas party, surrounded by other family members and friends and clients and colleagues, he would bring his daughter. And it was at one of our Christmas parties where she learned about a professional career that she could take. She was speaking to one of my friends. My friend's name was Kathleen. Kathleen at first was a nurse and then a nurse practitioner. And while they were going through and just hanging out and visiting and listening to music, they started talking about healthcare and becoming an RN or dreaming, what about becoming a nurse practitioner? And this young woman eventually would go on to become a nurse practitioner herself. And she credits that because she met someone through her dad's family member, that's me, named Kathleen. And now she herself is a nurse practitioner. And now she brings her children to my house. Next picture, please. And they meet not only my kids and my wife and my parents, but even my grandmother. Now we're 4 generations in to building bridges, my friends, knocking down walls, doing life together with grace, with love, with dignity. How do we do this going forward? Not just with Harold and his family, but with you. And in the way you vote, and in the way you worship, and the way you lead, and the way you go and grow and love others forward. How do you do this? We at Live Inspired Together for the last, we've been doing this for 17 years now, but for the last year and a half or so during COVID, have began trying our very best to serve individuals in the community where they are, as they are, regardless of who they are. We created the Live Inspired Together community. We created a text line so that we can send you videos, but also so that you and I can stay in touch. And the person who mans that text line, the person who responds to every single text that comes in, is my personal coach, my board member, my friend, and now I extend him to you. His name is Coach Matt. So Coach Matt is responsible for our coaching organization. And I brought him on today to give us, as we get ready to wrap up here in a moment, just a couple strategies on how we can live inspired together in these divided, difficult, challenging days in which we all live. So Coach Matt, welcome to Live Inspired Together.
Anyone that knows Harold, he just puts a smile on your face. So it was good to see his picture. Good morning, everyone. As we listen to John, my role as the lead coach here at Live Inspired is to help people be effective personally and professionally. And so when you hear something like this, usually 3 things happen. Number 1, we do nothing. We go back to being busy and we don't act on the most important things. Or number 2, because when you hear this, it ramps you up even more and you draw a deeper line in the sand. And you say, you know what, I'm going to really hold my ground. And if we're trying to be effective, what I heard most out of people throughout this past year is exactly what that stat that John talked about us earlier, about 13% of family members. Actually, in my role as a coach, over half of the people had a strained relationship within family, within. So number 3, as you hear John, I challenge you today to think of that inner circle, to think of your most important people professionally and personally, and where is there one that needs some improvement. And I say that because my next step will be, and what can you do this week, this weekend, today, this morning, to act on that? And if you go through that inner circle and your most important people are intact, go to that next step. Who's someone in your community, at your church, in your neighborhood that maybe doesn't look like you, as John said, doesn't vote like you, and invite them into a conversation and just have a chat. But most importantly, do the listening. And so with those 3 pieces, I hope 1 doesn't happen. I hope 2 doesn't happen. And I hope you take the next step. And if you need some help, there's a number, I think, right underneath me somewhere. Text in 314-207-5010. It's our Live Inspired community. I see a bunch of our family. We call them family here at Live Inspired Together. But if you need anything, John and I respond, and we will help you. And people can attest who have been a part of our community for a long time. We are here to help you focus on the most important, stay in your circle of what you have control over, and take the next right step. And a lot of the times, we need somebody to take that next right step, and John and I are here for you.
Coach Matt, you know I love you, and I'm grateful. We lost you for like 3 seconds, and I'm like, oh man, I hope we don't lose Miller, because I'm not sure I can step in and help people take the next right step. You then came back. We heard you loud and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have not ever texted Coach Matt and joined us in the Live Inspired Together movement, one more time, put the number back on the screen. Please text in right now. Join us. You'll receive the Saturday messages that get sent directly to you. So that's cool. That's awesome. But maybe even more life-giving. If you ever need anything, it's purposely broad and ambiguous and all-encompassing. If you ever need anything, we're here to serve you. We're here to love you. We're here to do life with you and to do so together. So as we get ready to wrap up, I do want to remind you all that we are here to change the world, starting with our own, and we do respond. We do respond. So next picture, let's take Matt Miller down off the screen, put a picture back up on the screen. There you go. That's the first time I met Miller. You will see, yes, love is the key. It's one of the things that unified Matt and I when we met about 11 years ago. It's one of the things that unifies us even today as we live forward, but it's also why we respond yes to the requests that come in. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who've been following me for a while, you know that there's a book out there called On Fire. On Fire. It came out 5 years ago. It's a #1 national bestseller, been translated into more than a dozen languages. I think many of you have read this book. I'm going to share with you in a moment the Amazon reviews on Fire. There's a reason why I'm doing this, though. So this is a recent update of the Amazon reviews of On Fire. So let's show that picture just for a moment. Now, if you go down, I don't know, about 5 or so reviews, I'm going to put a circle, a big old red circle around this. So let's share the circle. Now I'm going to zoom in because I recognize that's probably hard for some of you to read. Maybe your glasses aren't on, your contacts aren't yet lit up. There, maybe you can see it now. But if you're looking at what I'm seeing, I'm going to read this to you. My family and I recently had a tragic fire at our home. A very special family friend was burned, similar to the way Mr. O'Leary was. She's 11. She is currently in the hospital, and she has a long road ahead. This book has brought overwhelming comfort to our families in the darkest days. But here's the cool part, my friends. This is why I share this entire post. Mr. O'Leary even reached out to us personally, asking if he could do anything anyway. What a true class act. What a godly man. Thank you, John. Why would I read that to you today? It's not a humble brag at all. It is because we get requests from the community that come in through tweets and through Facebook messages, and people call the office and they write notes to our organization and they text Coach Matt and they say, hey, there's something going on in the community. There's a child whose parents are going through this storm. There's a little kid who's dealing with cancer. There's a child who's 11 who got burned. Can you do anything? And always, yes is the answer. Always, yes is the answer. We have had an opportunity to do life with sweet Natalie. That is the name of this 11-year-old girl who spent 5 months in hospital. One more picture because I want to show you her homecoming. She spent the same amount of time in hospital as John O'Leary did. She had the same odds of coming out of the hospital as John O'Leary did. But today, Natalie is moving forward into life. She is not allowing the scars to define her. She is rising up. She is moving forward, and she believes, like I do, that the best days remain in front of us. So with that truth being shared today, my friends, as we talk about the cancel culture, but we also talk about canceling the cancel culture with love, I want to remind you where we're going next month. One more slide. This will be where we leave it today. That's right. This is going to be one of the coolest Live Inspired episodes we've ever done. The title is Hope Will Not Be Canceled. If ever you have thought about leaning in on a Saturday morning at about 9 a.m., May 22nd might be the day for you. So write it down, pencil it in, text Coach Matt, subscribe to the free Live Inspired Together service. Post and text your friends right now. Have them join us right now. We're creating a movement not based on partisan politics, not based on how you identify with your gender, with your race, with your background, with your status, with your stature. If you're retired, if you're beginning your career, none of that. We're beginning a movement based on love. We're striving to change the world, starting with our own. So if you want to join us in that movement, man, there's room for you at this table. I look forward to doing life with you. I thank you all for being part of our conversation today. So for this time and until next time, my name remains John O'Leary. Hope will not be canceled. You are enough. This too shall pass. The best is yet to come. For this time and until next time, live inspired, and I'll see you next month.